start filling them out. Remember, there's the color coding, so if it's most important, it's green. If it's kind of important, it's yellow. If it's white, it's like, yeah, they could have it, but they could do without. So make sure you fill out your recommendations. That's all I got.
All right. New students on Monday, make sure you've got that all squared away.
Fill out your assessments if you haven't. We need to print the schedules on Friday.
Hi everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you everyone for being here. Appreciate it. Want to say a couple of things by way of introduction with what we're going to receive here today. As I've pondered this morning, the topic of us addressing student behavior, safety, and what our role is, it's possible that there's not been, I don't think there's any other project that that has, let me rephrase it, I'm getting all confused with how to phrase it. We've spent more time on this project, I think, collectively as an organization than any other project. When I think back to even here in this room, and if you, those of you that were around to some of staff meetings that we had here in this room and trainings, and then many of you volunteered to be on committees. I know some of you are new and you weren't with us at that time, but even back to 2.5 to 2 years ago, we had a number of committees and they met right here in this room to discuss this very thing that we're talking about. And so really appreciate so many of you that have been a part of this process. It's time for us as an organization to make the call and to carry it out. We've been preparing and working on this as a document in units and pathways. So many of you on committees. I spoke with one of you yesterday and you said you've been on 2 committees just about this in the last couple of years. And so I really thank you. Student safety and our role as an organization, it's an interesting thing, I think, for a number of reasons. And if you look at each one of us in our own personal life, we probably have some areas where we're similar with each other as a staff, but we also have some philosophy where we're a little different. And as we have to carry this out as an organization, we have to do what's best for the organization. And there's so many different factors to balance. If you look at the professional organizations that we're a part of, if you look at our own individual education and licenses that we all have, if you look at the State of Utah Department of Licensing for Human Services, which we have to be in compliance with, and all of the mandates and principles, there's a lot of factors, as well as our own personal perspective. And so hopefully this is an opportunity for us to now receive all of the work that has been put into this for the last couple of years. And I think what our individual role is to focus on this, receive it, and what is my specific role in carrying this out. And so I ask, as we receive this information, that we do that in an objective, professional manner, which I'm confident that we will. And also want to thank everyone for your part in the last 2.5 years as we've gone through this process. Thank you all.
Several in Microsoft terms means 2 hours, so we might not use our PowerPoint today. We have a backup one.
We're all right.
You have it right there.
We have this like old school outline as well that will help us. So Ryan and I have the privilege today of being the ones who will present and train on 4 new policies. 4 new policies may sound like a lot, but what's our core values here at Scenic View?
Never be satisfied.
That's part of it, and that's definitely something we do. A couple years ago, though, we came out with 3 core values. Everything we want to do, effective, efficient, and empowering. Okay? So whatever we do, we want it to be effective, efficient, and empowering. And so, hey, we can try and pull it up. And so when it comes to being efficient, we've had in the past over a dozen policies involving the kind of things we're going to be talking about today. We had crisis protocols and a student visitor policy, student vacation policy, internet access of personal devices policy, internet abuse notification process, internet contracts, red slip policy, consequences and safety, inappropriate materials, and on and on and on and on. We had tremendous amount of policies, all of them with good intentions built up over the years with a lot of different things, and all of them trying to look at student safety and behaviors. And so we're condensing those into the 4 policies that you'll see today. So one of the big goals we have is to be more efficient. We also, of course, want to be more effective. We're thinking that these new policies are going to be much more effective than our old ones. They may take a little massaging and tweaking at first, but they will be more effective in the sense that they're going to allow us to be more prescriptive, and they're going to allow us to not have to be in as many power struggles with our students as they're heading into adulthood as maybe we've been before. And they're going to be more effective at preparing our students for when they get out of scenic view. Everything we do here, we've got to have that mind to, and how are they going to handle this when they're gone? And so we're really pretty confident that this is going to be more effective as well. Was it you can share with you?
The target was.
Okay, good. All right, so we're good there. And of course, we want to be empowering as well.
And if you're wondering, like, what are these four policies, I'll just mention those real quick so you can like plug that in. So we're going to be going over our risk behavior and accidental incident policy, our crisis situation and difficult behavior policy, our internet policy, and student overnight and visitation policy. Okay, and what we're talking about right now is we're covering some of the whys behind these policies. Marty mentioned that if you took each one of us individually, we may have kind of personal values that would say this is how we should, this is what our policies should state. We might have other staff that say this is what our policies should state. So so what we did is we aligned our policies with who we are as an organization, our mission, and our philosophy of service. And that's a training that we did last summer that's still available on Google Drive, on Google Classroom. You can look at that. Hopefully everyone's already been through that training, but all of the things that we've done in these policies connect back to that, so that we're true to that. So some of those things are, we look at professional ethics and professional boundaries. There's professional ethics and professional boundaries guide the way we interact with students. They give us the values that we make decisions from, and how to handle difficult behaviors and crisis situations, and just how to help students progress through the program. So these policies are, we believe, a step forward in helping us to really align with professional values and ethics, and putting us as staff members in a professional role with students. The other thing is it's very person-centered and strengths-based. Let's see, are we there now? Oh, good. Wow. All right. Let's see. So as far as boundaries, one of the things that sometimes we are in a situation, if there's a rule, sometimes in that rule we may be in a situation where it feels like we're in a parent role, right? Oh, student, you got in trouble, and now I need to hold you accountable, right? We want to shift from situations that sometimes we're put in parent role, and be in situations where we're able to focus on safety and students' progression in a program. So there are some risk behaviors and things that might pull them away from being able to progress in the program, but the focus will be the program and addressing safety with the students. Also, best practices and also being ADA compliant is that we do our best, everything we can, to help develop skills and work with students in a least restrictive environment. So whenever you create a policy, you're if you look at like a continuum, you kind of pick, okay, where am I going to put this policy? Because as soon as you put it in writing, you're kind of drawing a line on that continuum of how restrictive it's going to be. So you could have things that are very restrictive, and then try to pull away that restriction so they're ready for life outside of scenic view. What we have done is align things more with what life looks like outside of scenic view, so we can create a least restrictive environment. But because of safety issues that we could run into, we need to assess for safety and build in scaffolding. Okay, so it might be more work up front of assessing what does each individual student need, but then we'll also have a plan in place of how to remove that scaffolding so students are ready for the real world. If it's too restrictive here, and then we send them out, and then they have to deal with all those risk behaviors and safety situations, and they haven't had that opportunity to experience those here and learn from those here. And if we're more comfortable with that, then if we're more comfortable with them dealing with it out there and not here, that might be something where we say, oh, if I'm a part of it, I'm worried, but if I'm not a part of it, I'm not worried. You know, that's not fair to our students. And so some of these policies might look like, wait, what? We're gonna do that here, or that's gonna be okay. But part of that is let's bring in some of those experiences that our students are experiencing off campus, and they're experiencing it without our support. And so, but here they'll have our support. They'll have staff to rally around them for us to intervene and to teach and to guide and put plans in place and to put scaffolding in place to help them learn boundaries and learn how to manage the emotions and things that they have. Also, just another thing is, this is something that we can kind of go back and forth on as staff as well. But if you see, we are an adult program. And so working with adults has a different set of protocols. If we put protocols in place for a youth program, that could be problematic. You know, if we came and we were being reviewed and they're saying, why do you have those rules in place? That's like a youth program, okay? So we built it as an adult program, but that scaffolding piece is recognizing that we are working with vulnerable adults, okay? But they are adults. The vulnerable piece is, hey, there are going to be some safety issues, so we want to be able to address those. Okay? So there's the why, okay? And as we're going through the what, we encourage you to keep reflecting back to the why, and because this could turn into 2 hours of, well, why this and why that? We have enough time to go over the what and how to implement it, and we need to do that uniformly throughout our program, that we're all on the same page, that we're not just creating our own little sub-policies, that we're all together on this.
And that's the working with the team. So as you have questions, there will be formats and forums for those questions, and there'll definitely be questions going forward. We encourage you to be talking to your unit supervisors. We encourage you to ask those questions. But if you could keep questions very, 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 very specific, as in like, hey, I don't understand that word. Those kind of comprehension questions for at least this first hour, that would be really helpful. All right, so again, 4 policies we're going to go through: risk behavior and accidental incidents, crisis situations and difficult behaviors, student internet, student overnight, and visitation. The risk behavior and accidental incidents policies will be officially effective today, but quite frankly, we've actually been following this for a long time. Crisis situation, difficult behavior protocols, again, effective today, but we've been pretty much following these anyway for a while. Student internet policy still has some things that need to happen, but we will get that in place as quickly as we can. Please silence all your cellular devices. And student overnight and visitation policy is going to have to be rolled out a little bit slower because it's going to need to come through the service coordinators with some additional information. Our target's the beginning of next block for that one as well. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start talking about risk behavior and accidental incidents policy. Now, you may not be able to see this, even though this screen is a lot bigger than the screen in the old grand room. Fit that. Somehow the projector actually got resized with this latest wonderful Microsoft update, so we'll have to fix that at some point. If you can't see this, we encourage you to be able to see it. We will be reading a lot of this, but you'll also have access to all of these policies today, so you can see them and read them, and learn them and love them and live them, and it would be great. Okay. Can I get a volunteer to read this paragraph, though? Because we're going to be doing a lot of reading. Thanks, Sarah.
In order to fulfill its mission, CMU strives to be a safe place where students can focus on gaining the skills they need for successful, empowered independence. This document is intended to serve as a guideline to define the variety of incidents that may occur while a student receives services at SVA, and to outline a protocol for intervention, reporting, and documentation when such incidents occur. For students that are injured while working, refer to the staff manual policy, Incident Reporting 3.4.
All right, so this is, if someone gets injured at work, our students, because they're our employees, have the same policies as the staff. So it goes under incident reporting. And if you get injured at work, it goes under that same incident reporting. The kind of incident reporting we're talking about here falls under two categories. One is volitional action on behalf of the student, so when they make a choice that is a risk, that causes risk or risk of harm to themselves or others, or when it's an accident and harm has come because of nobody's choice, something just happened, okay? So we're gonna go over both of those kinds. An incident is defined as any act, occurrence, omission, situation, or phenomenon that falls outside the norms expected for our services, in which a student is injured, put at risk, or in which would cause a reasonable person to be concerned about the act, occurrence, omission, situation, or phenomenon, okay? If in the moment you really want to see what do I do in this situation right now for this crisis, that's the second policy we're going to look at. That's the Crisis and Difficult Behavior Protocols policy. A little bit of philosophy here, but we do want to go through this. So, can I volunteer to read this general procedure? Robert, thanks.
The service coordinator is the expert on the ability, goals, actions, and motivations of a given student, with the assistance and consultation of direct service skills specialists. Interventions in response to negative behaviors are never designed to punish. They are designed to protect, to teach, and to reduce the chance of repeat behaviors. The service coordinator has maximum discretion in managing the educational components of interventions and in recommending additional protective measures, but mandatory protections should always be followed. As always, collaboration is encouraged. Personal feelings and personal values should be put aside in deference to professional best practices and stated CNFU values. The executive director and members of the supervisory review have final authority with regards to student interventions.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, and Ryan, help me out here as we need to look at stuff. But two things I really want to point out here is this. One, what are we not here to do? Punish. And this goes back to being a student-centered, strength-based program, but also philosophically, and if you look at the research, if you could punish people into good behavior, we would not have prisons, okay? It just wouldn't, we wouldn't need them. People would get punished and they would stop. So we are here to do two things. That's the second thing I want to point out. What are those two things we're here to do? Protect and teach. In all of our interventions with students and their behaviors, number one concern is always safety. Okay, are we protected here? And then as soon as safety is taken care of, we are here to teach. That's what we do. We're all teachers. And we're here to help our students prepare to live independent, productive, and fulfilling lives. And so that's what we're teaching, is the skills to be able to do it. If you think back to when you first became a liberated adult, right? Yay, I'm on my own, I'm independent. Raise your hand if you can think back to at least one time where you made a decision that was probably, in retrospect, pretty dang stupid. Okay? How many of those decisions may have even placed yourself in risk of harm, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, okay? And I could keep going. How many of us have made decisions that have put ourselves at financial risk? Yeah. Or gotten other people really mad at us, right? Okay, again, intentionally and unintentionally. And it's part of growing up, it's part of learning, it's part of failing, it's part of executive functioning, it's part of just becoming an adult and learning how to adult. But our job here is to protect, but as soon as protection is taken care of, then to worry about teaching. And how do we teach them so that when they're out there, they've got the best shot at making the best possible decisions. And that's what we're hoping for our students. It's like Ryan said, if it's bothering us more that the student is doing something here, but when they're off campus, it's like, whatever, who cares? You know, they're gone now. It doesn't bother me that the student is, drinking, doing drugs, whatever thing you want to think of. That should be an issue. If we're really here for students first, it matters here and it matters there, and how are we going to teach them, okay? So everything you see here, it's going to be protections and then teaching. Anything else you want to say on this one?
Yeah, you can go ahead and start scrolling down to this, but this is actually, when we understand how to do that, how to let go, how to really love a student but not own their decisions, it's really a huge load off of us. If we really understand we're here to teach, but we can't choose for them. Do everything we can to help them be aware of their decisions and their consequences, but we don't own it. Okay, here's another big change. This is something that's already kind of been happening if you just kind of look at how we've been handling crisis situations for the last few months, but supervisory review is what's now replacing student review. The admissions committee portion, they're still doing that, but the student review, where it met formally, and we had a lot more formal processes where we would even call students in to student review. So we still have the same benefits of student review, but it's more fluid and more flexible. Can I have
More empowerment for staff.
someone read this? Volunteer to read? Yeah, awesome, that'd be great.
The supervisory review is formed to provide support to the service coordinator and other direct service specialists. Through consultation and recommendation, the supervisory review supports the decision and action of the service coordinator and provides backup to allow the service coordinator and direct service specialists to maintain a healthy working relationship with the student. Supervisory review could include staff members with knowledge of the student and or behavior, and a unit supervisor, program director, or executive director. Supervisory review does not customarily meet with the student. Rather, the service coordinator manages the communication before the supervisory review and the student. For minor infractions, the service coordinator is responsible for managing effective interventions for the individual students as they work with, for communicating them to the student and other staff members' paths as necessary, and for following through on their enforcement. If the supervisory review needs to be involved with a minor infraction, the service coordinator is expected to recommend interventions. Where possible, students are encouraged to be involved in the creation and monitoring of their own interventions.
All right, good. So a couple things here. One, service coordinators may read this and say, wait, what? All that's on me? Notice it says the word managing, right? We need to pull these people in, and whenever we're dealing with risk behaviors, it's very healthy and to collaborate and to talk to other people. That can really help you make sure you're within the boundaries and making good ethical decisions and doing what's best for students. So just managing that team collaborative effort. The other thing is here we see that strengths-based. So we're not necessarily coming in and saying, oh, student, your internet's gone, right? That would be maybe what we might do as parents, right? But we might say, hey, student, you're struggling to show up on time. You need to come up with if you don't participate in the program, you're gonna have to leave. So what's your plan? And just do our best to work with the students in developing those plans for their success. There are times where there are safety issues that we'll go over that we need to be more, mandating some things, and we'll go over that. You can see here that supervisory review could be something as simple as there's a service coordinator therapist and they run and talk to their supervisor and say, hey, here's our plan, we're dealing with this behavior, are we good just to move forward with this plan? Yes. Or can it be, hey, can you come join a meeting with the student and kind of represent this plan as with the student? So it could be just small things and stuff like that, stuff like that's happening daily, right? We're checking with the supervisor on different plans. It could be more formal where, and we'll go over different tiers of risk behaviors, and you'll see that it can be all the way up to as formal as what student review was before, and it could be those same members of student review that we're pulling together.
But it could even just be service coordinator sends an email to their supervisor and says, this is what I'm doing, cool. And the supervisor's like, yeah, I got you. So the idea here again is that we're trying to empower staff to be as flexible as need to be in order to protect the student and to teach them whatever they need to be taught. Okay. Any quick questions on supervisory review? Tomatoes. All right. Documentation, we will be going over second hour, so all of you support staff and stuff don't have to sit through that necessarily, but basically we're going to have 3 tiers for risk behaviors. Tier 1 being pretty minor, Tier 2 being moderate, and Tier 3 being major. Tier 1, you don't necessarily have to document, but it's never a terrible idea to document stuff. Tier 2 and 3, you absolutely have to document, okay? And when we talk about risk behaviors here at Scenic View, there's 5 of them. And someone read number 1. 5 categories of risk behaviors. Yeah.
Self-harm. Scenic View does not provide constant monitoring of every student and is not equipped or intended to be a treatment facility for individuals who engage in any form of self-harm, defined as causing or threatening to cause physical injury to oneself.
Okay, so pretty clear. this is definitely something that could create risks, and we'll talk about what that might look like over different tiers. Number 2, someone read that one. Kelly.
Bullying and physical abuse. Student View does not tolerate any form of bullying or physical abuse. Bullying involves repeated acts attempting to enforce one person's or group's power over another person or group in order to create and exploit an imbalance of power. This imbalance of power may include social power and or physical power. Anytime a student threatens another student, it is considered bullying. Any fighting or physical harm of others is also included in this category.
So again, you'll notice we don't always kick students out if they're engaging in this, but there are different levels of this as well. And also notice that word repeated is part of the official definition of bullying, that this is a pattern that's starting. Okay, that would then show you that this is getting more serious as you're getting a pattern. Harmful sexual activity, number 3. Now we get no hands. No, Cameron, go ahead. 20 hands.
Harmful sexual activity. Scenic View encourages socializing and dating. However, sexual activity may have the potential of negatively affecting the progress of students. Sexual contact or sexting between students, some of whom are unprepared for such relationships, could distract from the program and mission of the school and can result in harm to those involved. Sexual abuse, sexual intimidation, and other illegal sexual behaviors are absolutely not tolerated. Publicly accessing or displaying pornography is not allowed. The category is intended to include both sexual acts or depictions of sexual acts, real or simulated. Note that masturbation is a private matter that will only be addressed if the student requests it or it becomes an interference with program participation.
Okay.
Or is done publicly.
Yeah. Well,
Not in that one. This one.
that would interfere with my program participation. I don't want to work here anymore at that point. Number 4. Someone's read number 4. Robert again.
Scenic View is a drug-free zone and does not allow students on its grounds to take illegal drugs, drink or store alcohol, use tobacco or smoke any kind of cigarette, including electronics.
Okay. Notice on its grounds. That's technically all we can legally control. Other harmful behaviors, number 5.
Other harmful behaviors. This would include anything not covered by the other 4 categories, such as theft, vandalism, chronic dishonesty, and prohibited behaviors as outlined. In addition, this would include a student failing to take medications as prescribed or failing to comply with program expectations.
So this is kind of a catch-all, but again, we're looking at harm. What are these things that are going to cause a safety issue or get in the way of their teaching? Because again, we're here to protect and to teach. All right, so any quick clarifications on 1 through 5? Anybody got any? Yeah.
Sexual harassment, I guess I know like sexual intimidation, but all those things are different to me, and I'm not seeing sexual harassment.
So that'd be that other illegal sexual behaviors. So harassment is technically at work, and that would be something where we would deal with it that way. But yeah, obviously something that we're not going to tolerate here. So yeah.
Is that yours too, Carrie?
But yeah, it was the same.
Kind of going along with the sexual area there, sometimes we'll hear a student maybe they'll discuss pornography, and obviously sometimes with pornography comes masturbation. Just so I can understand is if they're viewing pornography personally in their own space, and that's combined with masturbation and stuff like that, are we viewing that as that's all of that there is part of their choice, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's brought to our attention, then yeah, we may need to do something about it. But we know there's a lot that's not brought to our attention.
But
So that was going to be my second question. If that comes up, or someone
If a student requests it,
someone
or if
talks
it
about
becomes an
that,
interference,
we're still going to
participation.
provide treatment for that through the psychotherapist. But yeah, it's not like a punishment. Oh, you're doing that, now you're in trouble. Come to student review or supervisory review. We're going to work with you on pornography.
if that's something we hear about, do we report that or just say that's their own decision?
You can report it to the service coordinator, absolutely. And then it's up to the service coordinator to be looking at it.
Yeah, because one of the things that we will probably come up is when they're engaging some of these risk behaviors, we may know because it's flaring up with other students. You know, other students are having a problem with one of these risk behaviors, or it's interfering with the program somehow. So if we're not getting any information back, we might not know what it's due to. And so that information will help us assess what's going on.
CNQ strives to be a strength-based program and strives to recognize the positive efforts and actions of students. So we're looking at, what's their attitude on these things? Are they improving? What's the effect on others? Strives to be strengths-based. Again, see that.
Just one thing real quick. I think we've already stated this, but again, some of these situations, we look at what's our opportunity to teach, what's our opportunity to help the student grow in these situations as they arise. And then we're thinking intervention. So we're not thinking like, you did something wrong, here's your punishment. There's a safety issue, what do we need to do to protect and then to teach? So anyway, just reinforcing that.
Protect and teach, natural and logical. And because not all student risk behaviors are equal, our interventions and our responses will not be equal either. But we do want to have some basic categories to try and sort things into so we have some consistency in how we apply consequences and teaching consequences here.
One thing real quick, just Marty mentioned that there's a lot of people that had their hands in this, and you might be like, wondering, did I have my hand in any part of this? There was, I think 2.5 years ago, there was a safety and policy and consequences committee, which should have had an acronym, by the way, and never did. CNQ Academy, we need acronyms for long committee titles. But they went through and really helped identify what are those risk behaviors here at CNQ and to start structuring a protocol for how we handle those things. And feeling that that's going to empower the students to know, oh, if I do these things, here's the protocol, here's some things that are more concrete of what's going to happen. So we're going to show you some more of that, the concrete part and then the optional part as we go through tiers 1, 2, and 3.
And again, rather than spelling out every behavior possible, by having some basic guidelines and some broad principles, we think we're actually going to be better equipped as a staff to do what we need to do and also to help the students with where they need help. So tier 1, can I get someone to read the tier 1 definition here? Thanks, go ahead. It's an eye exam as well from the back. It's an eye exam as well.
You want the mandatory or the optional?
Just right through here.
Perfect. These are notable behaviors that have a small but significant impact on the student's success and safety of the person to escalate. They need to be acknowledged, but only on a lesser scale, and will usually involve only a minimum amount of students, staff members, time, and resources. Note that repeated tier 1 behaviors will result in the escalation of the designated level to moderate or medium.
So if you're doing tier 1 stuff a bunch, it can become tier 2 or tier 3. Now at every tier we have mandatory protection and education, again, safety and teaching, and we have optional safety and teaching stuff. The mandatory stuff we have to do, and we have to do it because it's our policy, we have to do it because a lot of it is involved with laws and licensure and that kind of stuff. Do the mandatory stuff. At tier 1, that just looks like a conversation with the student, reviewing behavioral expectations with them, and communicating to the service coordinator if it's during the day or to the HSW if it's outside of normal business hours in a timely manner. Okay, so that's all that's absolutely required. Can I get someone to read the optionals? These are things you could do in addition if you thought it warranted it. Thanks, go ahead.
Optional tier 1 protection and education measures. Assembly of supervisory review. Recommendation for core skills interventions classes. Creation of a safety plan and or behavior contract and completion of all contract items. Replacement stimming. Therapy and or couples therapy. Verbal and non-verbal communications instruction. Referral to medical professional. Compensatory actions, apologies, repair, replacement of items, etc.
Okay. So, again, hopefully these are fairly clear. If not, or if you're wondering, okay, what does replacement stimming look like? Again, talk to us, talk to your supervisors. for the sake of time, we're not going to go through super detailed on all of these, right? So Tier 2 moderate has its definition, it has its mandatory protections, it has its optional protections. Tier 3 major has its mandatory protections, which notice get longer, and its optionals, which get shorter as we go through. But just as a quick example, so let's go back to that first behavioral category of risk, which is self-harm. At Tier 1, so kind of minor, but has potential to escalate, what might self-harm look like at a Tier 1? Someone's talking about something, but really doesn't seem super serious. What else?
Maybe it's like you yourself or pulling
You're
hair out.
pulling hair out, you're picking your skin. I'm walking past the janitor's closet and I hear a student just verbally berating themselves, right? Those kinds of things could be Tier 1, okay? And again, pretty simple interventions there, but we do need to make sure that we're talking about these because it could escalate. If it escalated, what might a Tier 2 look like for self-harm?
Maybe a plan?
What was that?
A plan?
Well,
Is that Tier 3?
that might even be Tier 3, but again, you can go and consult then, because at Tier 2, here's something we do want to point out. Once it gets to Tier 2, you have a mandatory supervisory review. So now you can say, wait a second, is this Tier 2 or Tier 3? And you can help figure that out there. But this is something where, like, okay, we have a strong impact on success and safety and a strong potential for escalation. So now they're threatening suicide but maybe don't have a plan, or they're talking more openly about hurting themselves, okay? Tier 3 then obviously would be they've actually hurt themselves. So again, if they cut themselves, yeah, that might even just be Tier 2, but obviously depending on how deep and so forth and so on, whether they've actually attempted, whether they've got a serious plan, we're now on Tier 3. These are obvious urgent behaviors that have impact on student success and safety and mandatory protections for them and for us. And Tier 3 behaviors are ones that they may very quickly lead to you not being in scenic view because we're not equipped to be a 24/7 facility. So those are all outlined here, and there's even some example pages that you can get access to if you need. Ryan, any final things on risk behaviors? We'll refer back to this through the rest of the presentation.
Yeah, I think you've covered it.
Okay. The last bit here is, okay, so what if something dangerous happens on accident, right? So this is something dangerous happening on purpose. What if something dangerous happens on accident? There's 3 kinds: critical, regular, or property. Critical is what it sounds like. This is an accident that could be life-threatening, such as when they found a student lying on the ground unresponsive not too long ago, right? That's a critical incident. Regular incident would be anything where the student is hurt, but it's not life-threatening. And property incidents, the student's not hurt, what's hurt? Scenic view property, okay? They've broken glass, they've busted something, they've dented a car, whatever, okay? Procedures on these, they're all outlined for critical, regular, and property, and they're all pretty simple. Basically, they're the immediate safety and then contacting somebody. Immediate safety and then contacting somebody, and that is spelled out in those procedures. And we'll look at crisis things here in a second.
Yeah,
But,
you'll hit the.
yeah, let's just go on over to crisis then.
All right, so there's one policy down. This next one kind of mirrors it in a way. A lot of the protocols in there will be for certain direct service staff, but it's important for all of us here at CDU since we do cross paths and are all part of helping the students in one way or another. And it's important for all of us to know what the safety issues are so we can spot those and report those. Here, this is something that is kind of that baton passing in these crisis situations. You might say, well, we just talked about self-harm tier 1, 2, and 3, but that's not my job description. Right? So this is going to outline, well, if you're faced with any of those big risk behaviors and it's not in your job description to be, assessing that and treating that, coming up with a plan. This document is really probably the main one you'll be referring to as far as how do you field that safety issue and connect to whatever help that you need. So the first one here, just the medical emergencies. You can see it's pretty easy. Just call 911, follow first aid protocols, notify program directors as soon as possible.
Self-harm's a little longer. But again, it'll go through kind of the tiers here, like what if they're just talking about it? What if there's some actual self-harm? What if they're actively suicidal? So it's almost tier 1, 2, and 3 in what to do. And those are our suicide protocols. So again, if you're dealing with that, this is there to help. If you ever have questions, obviously grab other people in. What's wrong with this? You want to talk mental health issues, right?
Sure, yeah. So mental health issues, depression is something that we want to make sure that information is getting back to service coordinator and therapist. And here you see, it might require that something comes and there's this big situation they're kind of vomiting out, and it says visit with the student for 5 minutes and then kind of gather that information and pass it on. Psychotic behaviors. So that's our students. Some of our students could have the onset of like schizophrenia, or just have some untreated mental health issues that may escalate into psychotic issues. That's when they start having delusions and hallucinations, and just so when this says seems off, if you see kind of atypical behavior, it's atypical for that student, because we're scenic view and staff band students, we have a lot of weird behavior, but it's just weird for that person. Okay. But you can see a lot of things like here's step 1, a lot of times it's
So
just.
if I'm playing volleyball, follow these programs.
Yes. Something's wrong with Jared.
You know it.
Okay. All right.
Bullying and aggressive behaviors. Again, so you've got physical and verbal, and what to do in those situations. Again, notice that if you're here and there's a physical thing going on, you do not need to feel obligated to get involved. We don't teach restraints here, even physical or holding restraints. If you feel comfortable intervening, that's up to you, but that is not our policy. You can get them apart by talking to them, and if that doesn't work, you can call 911.
And can I just add something?
Yeah.
So a lot of people have died being put in improper physical restraints. So if you're going to do that, like, be ready.
That's what we
to
say.
kill someone.
And that's why we say don't do that.
Yeah.
Bullying, vulgar language. Note that the use of vulgar or inappropriate language requires intervention only insofar as it's distracting to the learning environment or amounts to bullying or fights. It is not our responsibility to police their language, only insofar as we're teaching them, or it's a safety issue. Again, that's where it's at. You're not going to get kicked out of CDP for swearing. You sure as heck could get kicked out of here for bullying or for constant insubordination. All right, harmful sexual activity. We got 15 minutes.
For 2.5 policies. Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So this is just talking about kind of what we respond to, what we don't. So if it's public displays of affection that start distracting from the learning environment, and we may separate it in that case or intervene. Let's see. You notice here, like public sexting or sexual touching or public sexual acts require intervention. Let's see. Okay. Anything else I need to cover now? Yeah. So if they're doing those things in public, we'll ask them to stop and remove it. Consensual sexual activity. Note that sexual activity may distract from the program and mission of the school and can result in harm to those involved, but is not inherently against SVA policy and may require no intervention. If staff members are informed or learn of sexual activity, it would be expected that they communicate that information to the service coordinator during business hours.
Note that that's consensual. Sexual harassment.
We have
assault,
sexual harassment word
any
there.
kind of non-consensual sexual stuff. It's defined here, and this is stuff where we absolutely have to intervene and must prioritize the safety of our students. Okay. And if there's a question, if it's consensual, well, that'd be a great time to consult.
So sexting, if it's public or interferes with the program, it's an issue.
Okay. If it's an underage person, obviously that's a crime,
Definitely an issue,
so
yeah.
we would definitely have to deal with that.
Okay. So we've already gone over pornography. and Jeremy's question helped us answer this one already.
And also masturbation.
So masturbation, we have this one on here. This is, we're actually going to delete this one right now. Do you have editing rights?
I've got editing rights.
This is something that, for those that have only been at Scenic View for the last few years, you might be like, why would you have a policy of masturbation, right? Or crisis protocol. That is something that we actually, historically, we would come up in student review and help people put a plan in place if we found out they were masturbators. Now, we don't see that going on. We don't hear of any people, staff members putting these plans together. Oh, you're in trouble. We heard that you masturbated and things. So we're just taking that off because we see it as a non-issue. We don't need to.
And it's still mentioned under risk behaviors. So if you had a student that was having a masturbation addiction and so they were leaving work every little while to go masturbate, that's something we'd have to intervene with. If you had a student that was doing that kind of stuff in public, or if they came to us and said, hey, I've got a problem and I want to stop it, again, that's where we would definitely get involved. But drugs, alcohol, and smoking, again, illegal drugs are still not okay. You notify program directors immediately. We're trying to avoid our students getting a rap sheet if possible. But again, that might be something where we have to get police involved depending. Alcohol, this is a little bit of a shift. If alcohol is identified or found on SVA campus, ask the student to remove the alcohol from campus and notify the service coordinator. That is our alcohol policy. Time-wise, we used to confiscate alcohol, we used to dump it out for them or keep it in the closets until Robert Ludwig and I decided that we wanted to have a party.
But there's still some alcohol for sale in Robert's office. I'm not saying if it was confiscated.
Actually, everybody got to share in the last round because Jerry used it for cookies.
All right, Jerry, well done. But again, we have underage people here. We have people below 21. We cannot have alcohol on campus. So they need to have it off campus. So that's a protection thing. That's a safety thing. Smoking has to do with state laws and our own personal safety of our other students and the dangers of secondhand smoking. So as you probably know, students have to smoke off campus. And we are looking at designating a spot that isn't necessarily across the road right where everybody sees it, so that the first thing they see when they come into Scenic View is people out there dragging on a cigarette. That may or may not be the image we want to have, but we're looking at that. Other situations.
All right. Yeah, we just added this one. Okay. So we just wanted this documented. We hear this kind of, written and unwritten, but just that, in fact, this is, I think, residential posted some rules for living in the resident building, right? Okay. All right. So yeah, so we have the quiet time after 10:30 at Scenic View, but you can see that it's not going there with a gun and threaten them. It's just, document it, because it'll be maybe the team, service coordinator and core that might intervene with that the next day.
We've got some signs in the HSW office.
Okay. Yeah, good.
Right, so this is saying, again, you'd remind the student, and then if it continued, you'd say, okay, I'm reporting this, you need to stop this immediately. If there's a safety issue, then again, the HSW coordinator or whoever that you're talking to is going to intervene immediately.
Yes.
Just to clarify, 10:30 is quiet time, meaning they have to be quiet. They don't have to be in their rooms.
No.
They don't have to be.
No.
We have no curfew, and we'll talk about that when we get to
And we have only a separate policy for that.
Theft and vandalism, not okay. Again, may need to be reported, may need to involve police. And we'll talk about visitors with the visitors policy. If we have an emergency, again, this is the emergency stuff, but water and fire and power outages, again, always report this kind of stuff. There's a calling tree on this, and there's crisis resources for those who are being called so that they can refer people to help with medical or mental health emergencies. Okay. All right. Speaking of emergencies, let's go to the internet policy. If you've asked students what an emergency is, a lot of times it involves the internet. A couple changes here. Again, this policy will be rolled out as we have the equipment for it. So this is probably something we don't want to share a bunch with the students right now. But we want you all to know this is where we're going, and it relates to these other policies as well. So again, status quo is going to continue until we have some abilities to do some different things, and we'll make those announcements as those abilities come into play. But basically, the first term that they're here, they will not have internet in their rooms, but they will have access to the internet in the community buildings so they can do their schedules and calendars and that kind of stuff. After their first term here, as they've completed the internet safety class, they have the option then of paying for internet, which we think will prepare them for being out in the real world where you pay for your internet. And so they'll have a device hookup fee, and they'll have a monthly fee for their internet services, but they'll have access to wired and wireless in their apartments. Now, if there's a safety issue, that's where we go back to our risk behaviors. That's where service coordinators get involved. That's where behavioral plans get involved, and all of those kind of things. But as students leave, they're going to have access to internet. And we do still have our filter, and we'll continue having our filter. Our internet filter is here for our own protection and their protection. But when they get out of here, they're likely going to have unlimited internet with with no filter. And so we're really trying to make sure that whatever we're doing to restrict internet, that it's a scaffold that can gradually be taken down so that they can manage that on their own when they're out of here and still be able to hold a job, still be able to have relationships, still be able to do those things they need to do.
Out of curiosity, what do we do with the students who have signed their contract that lasts a certain time?
Yeah, so those, again, so as we move forward with this is not implemented yet. It's status quo until you hear differently, and we'll deal with those on a case by case. Probably the service coordinator will sit down and have a little review and figure out how that will look. Okay, great question. Great question. And for more information on our philosophy, refer back to risk behaviors. While Scenic View employees are not tasked with monitoring or policing internet usage, a student service coordinator or therapist may independently request that the IT manager make changes to the internet account in order to support program success. Based on this request, a student's internet access may be limited, filtered more heavily, monitored, or suspended. And again, that can be the student requesting that as well. And saying, hey, I'm in here and I'm having a struggle with these kind of sites. I don't want to be able to access them. Great.
And one more thing with the internet, if in the past, if a student comes to you and says, oh, I have this internet issue or this internet issue, and if your answer's been, go to Jim, we're not going to filter that stuff through the service coordinator first, okay? I don't know if you've hung out with Jim for an hour, but if you have, you've probably seen like 3 students come his way. If you go out to the lunch area, there'll be about 10 students during lunchtime. So we want those things, since it'll be kind of managed, with core and service coordination, we want to send things down there.
So this one as well will be rolled out with the service coordinators and will not be immediately effective. But this is our overnight and visitation policy. Can I get a volunteer to read? Carrie, go ahead.
As landlord and administrator of on-campus housing and student safety is a top priority, Scenic View Academy has the responsibility to know when our students are staying on or off campus and to regulate all visitors on campus. Therefore, during residential students' first term, Scenic View students are expected to be in their assigned room by midnight when on campus and to notify their service coordinator of any time that said they will be staying off campus. In addition, no family visitors will be allowed to be
No non-family visitors.
Non-family visitors will be allowed to be in a first-term student's room after midnight. Following their first term, students living on campus who will not be in their assigned room by midnight are required to notify their service coordinator or the HSW who will fill out the student and visitor tracking sheet on Google Drive. The service coordinator may choose to modify this policy for individual student based on student safety risk behaviors and program interference considerations. Any modifications will be noted in the student and visitor tracking sheet.
Okay, so we'll be looking at the tracking sheet in a second. Read this last paragraph.
Students are welcome to have visitors if it does not interfere with programming and if the visitors check in at the front desk or HSW office after hours. Students can request to have off-campus visitors spend the night in their apartments if the visitors are approved by the service coordinator to spend the night. Their information will be noted on the student and visitor tracking sheet.
Okay. So this is the student visitor and tracking sheet. This is zoomed way too far in, but that's okay. So a student comes up and says, I'm not going to be in my room after midnight. Put the student's name here, service coordinator's name here, and by the way, this is filled out by the service coordinator or the HSW. So if you're not a service coordinator or an HSW, you don't need to worry about this. Service coordinator, his name, dates the student won't be in their room, location the student will be, again, for safety and because by law we need to be aware of where our students are. We need at least have a policy that asks them to tell us where they're going to be and any notes on that. Visitors. So someone's coming to visit, here's the student they're visiting, the room number, the name of those people, if they'll be staying overnight. If they're not staying overnight, what do visitors do? They just sign in on the books. We've got a book in the residential building, we've got a book here. They do need to sign in because we're supposed to be aware of what visitors are on our campus. That's best practice, that's our accreditation. So if they're gonna stay overnight, great. And if it's someone like, hey, my mom is always allowed to come spend the night at my apartment, okay, so service coordinators will again fill this out. So one of the things that will happen before this policy is rolled out is that service coordinators will have completed the basics on these lists, including this special instructions tab, where the service coordinator will be able to say, hey, for Eric, special instructions, Eric needs to be, you know, in his bed by 7:30 every single night. His lights out. Whatever it happens to be that you've worked out with behavioral plan with an exception with that student, does that make sense? So,
Yeah, if there's any safety concerns, you would put those on, the team would put those on special instructions. So the student says, hey, I'm gonna go to this student's room, spend the night. You can go to special instructions, make sure that there's no restrictions there.
Do we have any like criteria as far as someone that we would not allow to stay overnight on?
anytime there's safety issues possible, and again, that's emotional safety, psychological safety, all of that. Anytime there's safety issues, we don't probably want that person staying overnight on
There's
campus.
safety issue or interfere with the program.
Yeah, and then the other one is program.
Yeah, I mean, because imagine like a student who was inviting like a friend over that we knew nothing about. Would that just be something that we
This will be
try and ask some
this will be
questions
tracked
about?
here, and because it's now tracked here, you could pull this up and say, hey, so you had a friend come spend the night. Talk to me about it. How was that? What was? Or wow, I've noticed that as I look at this tracking sheet, both of these tabs can be sorted by student name, and so you sort by student name on this column. You just come up here and sort sheet column A to Z, and all of a sudden, boom, you can see, wow, this one student is constantly having visitors, or this one student is constantly out of their room at night. So way back in the day, we had Anthony and Ian, and Anthony was always spending the night in Ian's room. We'd be able to see that pattern. We'd be able to say, wow, okay, you guys need to be roommates, and we've got another room we can lease out here, so you can, and those kind of things, but we definitely want to be aware of that. Yeah.
I also think as we're coming to ask permission, some follow-up questions would be good, like how long have you known this person?
Yeah, for visitors, you have to ask permission.
2 hours, you might not get that permission.
Yeah.
If they were high school.
Again, that'd be a safety concern, and probably a programming concern. So
That's another thing we really would encourage. Like if if you feel uncomfortable at all, start collaborating with the team, or send Nathan Jensen to evaluate it.
And if-
there's discerning powers, he'll tell you exactly if they're approved or not.
yes, it's the Nathan Jensen power. By the same token, if the student is giving you vibes that they don't want this visitor, even if it's a relative of theirs, if they don't have a guardianship over that student, you can tell them, sorry, you can't be here, the student doesn't want you here. Or we'd rather you didn't come to campus. You don't even have to use the student's name. Yeah.
There's a visitor that doesn't necessarily have a tie to a specific student.
Then they shouldn't be staying overnight. So that's all, this is only overnight.
Well, if it's a student, if it's someone that comes that a student hasn't invited and a staff member hasn't invited, right, then on that other document, crisis protocol, there's like the unwelcome visitors. So we would, go through that.
Right, there it is. Unapproved visitors. Ask them to leave if they're not violent, call 911 if they're violent or refuse to leave. And document it.
Especially when we see these things when we're worried, it's usually after hours. Sometimes if it's during hours, they may be curious about who we are. But after hours,
If you see visitors wandering around with no one, please report that. We've had problems with that in the past, so don't allow that to happen.
I said it and I just missed it, but the overnight, is that just the residential building or is that residential building and apartments?
That's if they're living on campus, so it's also apartments. Great clarification, thank you. All right, so those are the policies. We're gonna be breaking for lunch here in a second. And then after lunch, we're gonna have direct services come back. We're gonna do a quick little.
Actually, we're bringing food up for direct services, so you guys can just go.
Okay, so support services, you guys are free to go get your lunch. Everybody else stay here. If you need